Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source. I'm your host, Jace. This is a crowdfunding episode. We're going to be talking today about a campaign that's currently live on Zoop. The campaign is for the life and death of the brave Captain Suave, and I have the writer, Josepn Sieracki, joining me today to talk about it. Joseph, thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely, Jace. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yes, I got a chance to read the book. Thank you for that. Very interesting, very different take on a superhero story, as it were. So, why don't you give our listeners an idea of what the book's about? What's your elevator pitch?
Yeah, sure. We kind of went for like a modern day Don Quixote. And if your listeners are not super familiar with Don Quixote, and I think everybody has at least like a passing knowledge, you have this idea of maybe someone fighting a windmill or something like that. But basically, Cervantes, Don Quixote, was a man who believed himself to be a knight errant. He kind of got obsessed with these stories of knights and saving damsels in distress and things like that. And we kind of modernized that. We took that and took it to a kind of like a classic superhero spin on it, where instead of our hero thinking that he's some knight errant, it's a homeless man living in downtown Cleveland who believes himself an actual real life superhero.
Yeah, so interesting take because, and a lot of people, Don Quixote is considered a classic of, I don't know if you'd say modern literature, but it's definitely considered a classic. A lot of people have to read it in high school and what have you, and it sort of stands the test of time. But what people don't realize is at the time, I wouldn't go so far as to say it was controversial, but it was definitely kind of a social commentary, if you will, um, which is interesting because over time society changes and what have you, and then maybe some of the things you were concerned about politically, they're no longer really relevant. So one of the things that really struck me when I was reading Captain Suave was this idea of people that are forgotten. They fall through the cracks,
Mm,
homelessness,
yeah.
you want to kind of forget them and what have you. So it has a little bit of that to it, right? Like this idea of we should be doing more to help those that are homeless. We shouldn't just be forgetting them. Mental illness is a problem in this country as well, sort of conflated with homelessness, as it were. Um, so I'm curious, were those kind of issues that you were wanting to make a commentary on? Was it just sort of happened as kind of organically with the story, and those are kind of the obvious issues that are going to be sort of remarked upon, or was it something that you feel like, hey, I want to tell a story that involves these kind of things because I think it's a conversation that we need to be having.
You know what is I think it's a little bit of all of those things, but the latter probably the most of the three that you mentioned. Um, I don't know how many high schools actually make you read Don Quixote, but it's a very long but worthwhile read. And one of the things that struck me when I read it the first time, just just kind of how you said it, it's not a really a modern classic, but it feels extremely modern. It's very metatextual. The humor is really what drew me to it, the absurdity of the situations, but also the hearts. And that's something that we try to capture while highlighting some of the issues that you mentioned. I actually did quite a bit of research and reading various nonfiction books about mental health and homelessness and the pervasiveness of that in our society today. And yeah, there's definitely some issues that we wanted to highlight, kind of this overlooked thing in society. I mean, you go downtown and you walk by homeless people all the time, and most people don't give it a second thought. They're kind of this forgotten group and just kind of like fade into the background. And we wanted to bring that kind of to the forefront here.
Yeah, it's so easy to ignore the problem, but it's only getting worse. And don't get me wrong, everybody, I don't have some magic solution. I don't think there really is a magic solution. I mean, it all comes down at the end of the day to money, unfortunately. Um, and we're a country and a culture and a society that's kind of reached late stage capitalism here, and I'm certainly no socialist, but at the same time, you have to realize that if you have a sufficiently advanced society and you engage in late stage capitalism, there's a real human cost. There's a real human price to pay. So, yeah, I mean, if money were no object, we're living in the Star Trek universe or what have you, then everybody would have a home. But that's just not the case. So, yeah, I think it's worthwhile to have those conversations. But in terms of talking about the actual story, what there is here, because it is entertaining. There is a lot of humor, but there's a lot of heart, like you said, much similar to Don Quixote. You mentioned the setting being in Cleveland. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, there's a very um, kind of powerful forward in this book, everybody, that kind of explains why Cleveland and how Cleveland, um, in and of itself, is a bit of an inspiration. So you want to talk a little bit about that, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I'm from Cleveland, so it made it a lot easier to write the setting, knowing the city as I do. But also, what a lot of people maybe don't realize is Cleveland is sort of a historic city, particularly when it comes to comic books. And our introduction, written by author Brad Ricka, like you mentioned, kind of delves into that a little bit. Brad Ricka is an author of a number of books, but the one that really struck a chord with me and why it was important that I reach out to him and see if he would be willing to do an introduction for our book was a book called Superboys. And Superboys is kind of a fiction, nonfiction story of uh, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, which were two Cleveland kids growing up in the city that came up with a superhero that perhaps everybody has heard of, Superman. And Superman kind of kicked off the whole superhero aspect of comics. Comics were very different before Superman came along, and then everybody started emulating that. So they saw the success that Superman was having, and really so many of the superheroes that we associate with comics today kind of snowballed out of all of that. So you could kind of think of Cleveland as almost the birthplace of the superhero. So having this main character who's just so obsessed with superheroes, it makes a lot of sense just to have him also taking being part of this city. And the city plays a pretty integral role throughout the story. We hit a lot of landmarks throughout Cleveland, and we try to like tie parts of that to the story. So it's kind of almost like I don't know, almost feels like another character in the story. The city is pretty important to the rest of it.
Yeah, this is a story that, when it comes to the cast, it's real interesting, a very eclectic number of supporting characters, and the cast grows over time as we get to the end. There's probably more characters in the final issue as far as and they're minor supporting characters, but there's more as the story goes on. Really, in the first couple issues, it's Captain Suave and his sidekick Champ, as he calls him.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder. I mean, yeah, we talk about homelessness, we talk about mental illness, and Captain Suave obviously suffers from both of those two afflictions. But like we are
Sure.
saying earlier, he's got no shortage of heart, and really, this guy is out there trying to help, other people despite his sort of detachment from reality, as it were. But he also at times demonstrates incredible intelligence. I mean, not just comics, but Shakespeare and quoting things and what have you. So he's got some an abundance of empathy, but there's also some intelligence. Can you talk a little bit about the development of the character? Because it would have been real easy. I mean, because he is a sympathetic character and he does have a lot of heart, so you definitely root for him. But the choice I found specifically interesting was to give us a little bit of his backstory, which certainly
Mm-hmm.
has a feel of there, but for the grace of God go I, and it's probably something that a lot of homeless people can relate to, losing the job and depressed economy and what have you. Um, but I found it interesting to have that in there because while it added to the story, I also felt like it wasn't necessarily needed in terms of this guy is already sympathetic, as it were. So, talk a little bit about the development of him and how you kind of fleshed him out as a character.
Yeah. So we definitely wanted to show. I almost think of this as a book of varied dichotomies, different sides, of the coin. And one of the things with Captain Suave is, and we wanted to show that he's not just this crazy individual, and maybe like you said, maybe his lot in life really isn't so far off from the rest of us. Part of his backstory was actually taken from an actual case study of some workers and an individual who did lose their job, a factory job here in Cleveland, Ohio. So these things they're happening all the time, and when we think of homelessness, it often is separated from us, and that would never happen to me, or this only happens in these areas, but really, it's happening everywhere now. And with the housing crisis and evictions that are taking place, and just the money that's, like you mentioned earlier, just going elsewhere and not anywhere near this problem, is becoming quite pervasive. So yeah, we didn't necessarily need to give him maybe this backstory, and show the readers that, but I think it was important to developing and fleshing out this character a little bit more. And we also, if we were going to take the book further, we might see some of that playing into later storylines as well.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. If there's further plans for this, then having that context, yeah, becomes more important. But the only reason I bring it up is because I just wonder um, about the relatability. Yeah, because when you do say, okay, these are his circumstances, then you wonder if there's some people that can relate to it, but some people not. But what's interesting, and where I do feel like it works, and I'm certainly glad it's there, and the book is wonderful, and better for it, was once you gave the context for Captain Suave, then it makes sense that you're going to give the context for Champ as well,
Mhm.
because his is a different set of circumstances, but one I think that also is unfortunately commonplace. So, was that something that you had planned, that you were always going to show not only the kind of the situation that led Captain Suave down this path, but also for his sidekick Champ?
Yeah, so the general conceit was with the first issue, and this is, by the way, we're talking about a collected edition of 5 issues. So with the first issue, when we initially put it out, it was introducing the concept of, you have this homeless man that believes is a superhero, deals with fantasy versus reality, and you kind of get a feel for that whole world. The second issue, we really wanted to build the relationship between Captain Suave and what he believes is his sidekick. And for your listeners, he sees the real character's name is Stanley, and Stanley is a grown man. However, Captain Suave sees him as kind of this classic childlike sidekick
Yep.
that you might see, like from some of the Golden Age or Silver Age comics. And first, that we thought that just set up kind of a funny dichotomy between them. A lot of jokes that we play on that. And by the way, we are talking about this book very, very heavily, but I promise there is a lot of humor diffused throughout, and a lot of ridiculousness too. But we do touch on these issues. And one of the issues with Stanley, who Captain Suave, sees as Champ, this child sidekick, is he deals with problems with addiction. And we get to see kind of like where that addiction came from, and some of the consequences of that addiction, and how it is played out throughout Stanley's life. So yeah, that was something else that we wanted to show, that this wasn't just some junkie or something like that. Stanley's got a story like everybody else. There's circumstances that put him there, and there's reasons why he's sticking with this crazy guy going out there and trying to help people in the city. Like, not many people would do that, but there's reasons for Stanley doing that.
Yeah, his arc, Stanley's arc, is maybe my favorite, because even he's reluctant. Even he at the beginning is kind of asking himself, "Why am I hanging around with this guy?" But by the end, um, you can kind of see Stanley's taken inspiration from Captain Suave. He's learned, he's grown as a person, and maybe he's on his way to getting himself out of his situation. So yeah, really really interesting. Yeah, we again, like Joe said, we've been talking a lot about the kind of these heavy themes that are involved in the book. But yeah, there's a lot of entertainment value. There's a lot of humor, as he said, a lot of crazy situations, fart jokes and whatnot that kind of had me laughing out loud. Because yeah, you got to deal with those kind of things. It gets even a little meta. Like they meet up with some other unhoused, if you will, at one point early on, and they're like, "Where do you go? Do superheroes go to the bathroom?" We never see that in the comics, whatever. And Captain Bob says something about, "Yeah, that only happens off panel." So it's kind of hilarious. But the other thing that makes this work, both in terms of the sight gags, and also there's times where we're seeing the drawing, and you can kind of see it on the cover, everybody, if you're checking us out on YouTube. The artist, Kelly Williams, who gives us this sort of classic look of, this knight errant as a superhero, which is how Captain Swab sees the world. But then we're actually getting, what's reality. So it's an interesting challenge for an artist. How did Kelly get involved in the project? Is that somebody that you brought on? Is it somebody that, originally came out through Scout? Was it somebody they suggested? How did the initial collaboration happen?
So initially, no, Kelly and I developed this entirely together from the
Gotcha.
beginning. Kelly and I had met prior to working on another graphic novel prior to this one. It was called A Letter to Joe, and we put it out at Top Shelf. Basically, it was a graphic memoir that we developed from a letter that my grandfather had written my grandmother at the end of World War II. Um, I didn't know Kelly when we started that project. The editor had suggested him, and we kind of just really enjoyed working with one another. We developed a friendship from there. And at the end of that project, we both wanted to work together again. So we developed a first issue of Captain Suave, which is pretty similar to the first issue that you see in this book here. And we kind of just kept rolling with it. And we've worked on a couple other projects since then. So yeah, Kelly and I have grown pretty tight since our first project together. So from the get-go, he was the artist, and we really collaborated a lot on the conceptual basis of this as well.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that in terms of character design. I mean, when it comes to the world, like, and again, it's incredible art from Kelly because you're getting these fantastical images, and it's what Captain Swab sees in his mind. But yeah, based in Cleveland and in kind of the seedier parts of Cleveland, where where these guys are hanging out in abandoned buildings and that sort of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously you can draw from real world reference when it comes to that. But then in terms of developing the look for the main characters and developing the look for those kind of fantasy panels, if you will, that are in Captain Swab's imagination. Was that back and forth? Was that you telling Kelly, okay, this is what I envision? He comes up with an idea, throws it back to you, and you're going back and forth, or did you just throw it over to him and go crazy? Let's see what you come up with.
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit of the first one. I write full script with panel descriptions and the dialogue and everything, but then Kelly just kind of takes it from there. He'll change things or he'll bounce things back, throw some thumbnails my way, and then we kind of spitball off of that. I don't know if this was immediately apparent to you, but Kelly normally works in pencil ink and watercolors. So he colors his own art, hand painting it. And he used that technique for the reality aspects of the book, but for the fantasy aspects, where Captain Suave seen himself as a superhero or superhero-like things happening around him, like villains or whatever, he used pencil and ink, but instead colored it digitally and used kind of like a Ben-Day dot patterning to give it that kind of classic superhero style to it. And up to that point, I had personally had never seen anything like that on a comics page, and um, honestly wasn't even sure if it was going to work. I'm like, are you sure that's the way you want to do it? You really think that's is it going to look weird with those side by side? But I think we were both very pleasantly surprised and happy about the way that the fantasy and the reality kind of plays together on the page there. So I don't know if it was happy accident or Kelly just knew all along that this was going to work. But yeah, he does a great job just depicting these two things. And sometimes we even have them blending in a little bit within a single panel. You might see parts of the panel that are reality, parts that are fantasy. So it really gave him a lot of freedom, I think, to do some cool things. He generally, I think, kind of considers himself a horror artist more than like superheroes, but he has an expressiveness, particularly in facial features, that I think I can't imagine doing this book with anybody else.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you brought up the color because that was on my list to talk about. And the thing that it does, the different style, because I definitely noticed the kind of, and again, everybody, it harkens back to kind of newsprint. If you remember like Sunday comics or
Mm-hmm.
old comics where you could kind of see the dots, right? Because that's how comics used to work. You had three colors basically, and you how depending on how much of each color, what percentage you set it, and on the printer, that's it would put the little dots. It would make them darker or lighter, and the combination would give you color. And so what it does, it makes it very immersive, having that change from one panel to another, or like you said, sometimes it's even mixed within a panel, and it shows just how powerful the I guess for lack of a better word, the delusions that Captain Suave is seeing, how much they affect him, how much he truly believes it. I mean, this is how he's seeing the world. So it really informs the way he talks, the way he acts, the decisions he makes, which, can sometimes be humorous, can sometimes lead to hijinks and shenanigans, and sometimes kind of put himself in danger. So I think I couldn't really imagine not doing it in these two different styles. I don't know that it would work as well. The story, it wouldn't be as impactful, I don't think.
Yeah, I completely agree. If we had done this like a more traditional comic book and you just had one style going throughout, I just don't think it would hit like that it did. Um, and then Kelly too, for lack of a better term, some people might say that he has kind of a cartoony style to him. And some people take that as a knock. I think that style just works perfectly for everything that he does. He does really beautiful art all around. Um, but again, it really lends itself to the expressiveness of the character. So, when he's trying to display or convey certain emotions, he can do that incredibly expressively. That might be a lot more difficult if you're trying to go a more realistic style.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And actually, you're like reading my mind here. That was going to be my next point about Kelly's style is, not quite to the point of caricature, but they're certainly stylized, and again, everybody, if you're checking us out on YouTube, you can see what we're talking about with the two different styles right here on the cover. But when we're talking about kind of characterization and a lot of character in the face of these people who, yeah, they're homeless. They've been through stuff. So there's a lot of character in the face. You can see it on Captain Suave in the mustache, right? You can see it in
Mhm.
Stanley with how long his face is. He has a very, elongated face, which kind of conveys this kind of sadness and this feeling of kind of being worn down in the world and what have you. But beyond that, like you said, the facial expressions, when Captain Swab's doing these crazy things and people are their eyes are getting big or they're kind of
Mhm.
surprised. Um, and again, as the story goes on and the supporting cast grows a little bit, getting to see the quirkiness visually of all the different supporting characters is a lot of fun. I imagine Kelly probably had a lot of enjoyment out of getting to draw all these different. I again, it's work as you get to be more characters, but getting a chance to play with different visuals, right?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. At the end of the day, the imagination was the limit because these are things that our main character is imagining. So there's really no limit to what he could draw. One of the things that a lot of people hooked onto in the first issue, and this might be a slight spoiler, but everybody again knows of the windmill and tilting with the windmills. Well, we
Yeah.
took that concept and we said, all right, well, downtown Cleveland, what's the kind of equivalent of a windmill? Well, right at the Science Center, right by the lake, there's a huge wind turbine on display there, and that's kind of like a modern day windmill. So he sees this, and he construes it as a three-headed hydra coming out of Lake Erie, and he feels that he needs to defend the city from it. So that you get a tremendous double page spread of Kelly just kind of showing his not only um, you know ability to convey the characters, but also a little bit of the monster and the horror that he really enjoys drawing. So yeah, he got to really let loose and not only employ these different styles, but just really draw anything that he really wanted to.
Yeah, and despite that, despite the whimsical and the fantasy of the element, again, and the kind of real, again, it's caricature, but there's a realism to these characters in terms of what's exaggerated just makes us realize that, they've had a tough time, right? They've lived life,
Right.
and life life has hit back sometimes. So this is available on Zoop, everybody. There's a link in the show notes. The campaign is live as you're hearing this. This is probably going to drop the same day the campaign goes live. So definitely go and check it out. I'll remind everybody, as I always do when we do these crowdfunding spotlights, that, hey, maybe this sounds like it's exactly up your alley and you really want to join the campaign and help support Joseph and Kelly and make sure this comes to fruition. But times are tight, right? We get it. We understand. Um, the other way you can help out, if you're not able to join the campaign and get your hands on this book yourself, is to share it on social media, let your local comic shop know, let other people that you might know, friends that are comic readers and not just maybe you have friends that it sounds like this would be something to be interested in. Just let them know. It only takes a minute to go over, click the link and check out the amazing artwork and the campaign and see if you want to become a part of it. So, let's talk a little bit about that, Joe. Like, what was your impetus in wanting to crowdfund this for a collected edition, and specifically why Zoop?
Well, we had originally put it out with a publisher that you had mentioned earlier. However, the book kind of went well under the radar for a number of reasons. And we eventually were able to part ways with that publisher and get all of our rights back on the book. And we knew that when we did that, we really wanted to bring it to an audience because we didn't really seem to find much of an audience the first time around. So Kelly had a relationship with Eric over there at Zoop. Kelly does a lot of shows. I don't get to go to as many shows as him. And he had met Eric there, and they've been looking for a project for a while. And so, Kelly said, well, what about this? This is something that we've been, thinking about putting this collected edition together. And Eric checked it out and he's like, yeah, this would be perfect. And the cool thing about it too is we really got to do this then the way that we always wanted to do it. Sometimes when you're working with a publisher, there's certain oversights and there's things that they make certain decisions on. Kelly and I really got to design this book and put the book together exactly the way that we wanted to. It's going to be a really nice cover with spot gloss and embossment, and it's going to sing. And we got to put everything that we wanted in there, not to mention the 5 issues, but there's some extras in there like maps of Cleveland, showing kind of like where the exploits are taking place. There is a backup that's we had originally used as an ash can. That story's in there. It's a standalone. And then all the covers and everything else, and not a whole lot of filler, to be honest with you. Like I know a lot of people like process. Me personally, I'm a little burnt out on seeing that in books. It almost feels like padding. So we got 140 some pages of what I would call really just comics. So I think you're getting a lot of story out of it. And then we just like what Zoop's doing. Zoop, the whole bringing these stories that may not otherwise find audiences or exist. I think they're doing a really good job of that. I like how they're focused on comics and not other projects, and kind of putting comics at the forefront. So I think over there at Zoop, they're doing some really good work, and we were happy to be part of that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm glad you guys are bringing it all together because here's the thing, like even though it was originally released as single issues, And you can certainly tell where the page breaks are, or the issue breaks are when you read it, everybody. I can't really imagine reading this as a single. I think it reads so much better. Again, I didn't read it in single, so I can't say for sure, but having read it all together in one sitting, it just feels like this is the type of story that just works better kind of as a whole. And again, not to say you couldn't come back to these characters and tell more stories, but as far as like a self-contained story in these 5 issues, I think it just works really, really well with everything all together in one package as opposed to single issues. So was there was that something originally when you guys developed it? Would you have preferred to have done it all in one as opposed to singles?
Honestly, we debated a lot on that back and forth. I'm glad to hear you say that, Jace, and I appreciate that. I often did feel like, you get a taste of what we're going for and the sense of the world in that first issue, but do you really connect with the characters as much as you do when you start to go into the later part? So yeah, I did felt always that there was an overarching story to all of this, and I do think it does read really well as a single package, and that's another reason why it's really cool to be able to put this all together and have it as a single volume, single book here. So yeah, I'm glad that you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a situation too where I like you sent me the copy so I could check it out before we chatted, and I had just a few minutes, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna like start reading it, and then I'll go. I was gonna go for my nightly run. I started reading it, and I couldn't put it down. I read the whole thing and just went later to run because
Oh, that's awesome.
I didn't want to stop reading it. So yeah, it's a very compelling human drama, everybody. And again, there are those big themes, heavy themes that we're talking about. But like Joe said earlier, there's a lot of humor, there's a lot of sight gags, there's a lot of fun, there's a lot of entertainment, and you can definitely read it on that level. So
And it plays
uh,
off comics a lot too. Like I think comics, it's a comic fans kind of comic. I don't know. That's
yeah,
that's the way I would put it.
oh there's some meta stuff in there
Yeah.
about artists. I mean, Jack Kirby's name dropped, and Ditko, and yeah, there's a real funny interaction where Captain Suave and somebody are arguing about Mary Jane and Watson
Yeah.
from Spider-Man. Yeah, so yeah, there's some definite inside baseball stuff there. So a little something for longtime comic fans. But as we're winding down here, Joseph, let everybody know if they have questions about it or want to ask about it, or maybe they want to reach out after they've read it and ask questions. Do you have a presence on social media? Is there somewhere online that's best?
Yeah, you can find me at Instagram. It's my last name, first initial, so Sieracki J. And then on Twitter, I am Joe's Tweet, though I've been a lot less active there as of late. And yeah, we're going to have a number of rewards, but like you said, if you're not able to purchase one of those rewards, just getting the word out is awesome. People contact me. I'll be happy to give you a little bit of a preview of it if you want to check it out first to see if it's for you or not. I can give you like a 10-page preview or something. So reach out. Absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. And then we also try to make the digital reward as affordable as possible. So um, we ask them to set that as low as we possibly can. So, if you're looking for a cheaper option and you still want to read the book, that'll be available as well. And by the way, having already completed all of these issues, the book is completely done and ready to go. And I know with a lot of other campaigns, you got to wait and wait and wait. This is really just going to be printing and sending it to people.
Yeah, fantastic. So again, everybody, you're gonna get your hands on it. The book's already completed, and yeah, sometimes it's not even well, I want to spend less to get the digital. It's a matter of space, right? Like I am
Right.
so limited on space these days. So having a digital option is fantastic. So I'll put links to Joe's social media in the show notes, everybody, as well as a link to the campaign. So if you're having trouble finding them, you can go and click there. And as we're winding down, as we're finishing up, any last thoughts you want to share with our audience, Joe?
Just like I said, if you're it all, this sounds the least bit interesting to you, check it out. Reach out to me or Kelly. We'll give you a look at it. Give it a shot. I don't know. I think a lot of people might enjoy this, particularly again if you're a comics fan. You're likely gonna enjoy a comic book that's got a superhero that's not really a superhero. Maybe that might be something you've not seen before.
Yeah, again, recommended everybody. It's definitely worth a read. So, best of luck with the campaign, Joseph. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jace.
And to everybody out there in the audience, whether you're joining us on YouTube or listen to the audio only feed from the podcast, we appreciate you taking the time as always, and we'll talk to you next time.